Shavua Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi Masechet Gittin. We are up to Perek Dal Mishnah Chet. Today's Mishnah should be Leilu Nishmat Neria ben Svetlana Ranbai Eliyahu ben Burcha Israel of Chana bat Miriam Sason ben Raya and Yoshua ben Shifra Menuchatam beGan Eden Amen and Avdi ben Chaim lechaim v'derefua shelema Daniel Shalom ben Rosa betoch Shar Cholei Israel. The Mishnah discusses a case similar to those of the previous Mishnah. Hamotzi et ishto mishum ailonit. If someone divorced his wife because he thinks that she is an ailonit, a woman whose body has not developed typical female characteristics and who therefore cannot have children, and the husband mentioned at the time of the divorce that this was his reason for divorcing her, Rabbi Yehuda says, Lo yachzir, he may not remarry her even if she is later discovered not to be an ailonit. The rabbis decreed this because in case the husband is wrong and she were to marry another man and have children, the first husband might then claim, had I known that she was not an ailonit, I would have never divorced her. Such a statement would imply that the divorce was a mistake and that her children from the second husband are mamzerim. We therefore tell the husband before he divorces her that he will not be allowed to remarry his wife if he goes ahead with the divorce. But the sages say, Yachzir, he may remarry her. The prohibition against remarriage does not apply here because the husband cannot claim that the divorce is invalid. The husband said only that he is divorcing her on the assumption that she is an ailonit. He did not say that he is not divorcing her if she is not an ailonit. The sages therefore rule that the condition is ignored because they hold that a condition is not binding unless both sides are mentioned Tanai Kaful. Since the condition is not binding, the divorce is valid regardless of whether she is an ailonit. Because again, he said that he is divorcing her on the assumption she is an ailonit. He did not say that he is not divorcing her if she is not an ailonit. That's not a condition that the sages consider valid. And the Rav explains the Gemara, based on the Gemara, page 46b in Masechet Gittin, Man Chachamim, who is the sages in this Mishnah? Rabbi Meir, it's Rabbi Meir, who requires Tanai Kaful, both sides of a condition to be mentioned for it to be binding. Now the Mishnah teaches the law in the case where she was married to another man and was then discovered not to be an ailonit. Nised la'acher vayu lah banim hemenu. If she married another man after her first husband divorced her because he thought she was an ailonit, and she had children from the second husband, v'tovaat ktubata, and she now demands payment of her ktubah from her first husband, claiming that since it has been proven that she was not an ailonit, she is owed her ktubah. If a husband divorces his wife because she shows signs of being an ailonit, he does not have to pay her the ktubah, as it says in Masechet Ketubot, chapter 11, Mishnah 6. Since the marriage was based on the assumption that she could have children, the marriage is void. However, having had children from the second husband, which proves that she is not an ailonit, she may now demand the ketubah payment from the first husband. Amar Rabbi Yehuda said, Omrin lah shetikutich yafa lich midiburich. We tell her your silence is better for you than your speech, meaning it is wiser for you to remain silent and not request the payment of your ketubah from the first husband, because if you do, he might respond, had I known that I would have to pay your ketubah, I would have not divorced you. In which case the divorce will be void and your children from the second marriage, mamzerim. Although Rabbi Yehuda ruled above that the divorce is final, meaning he can never claim that it was based on a mistake even if it is discovered that she is not an ailonit, the husband did not have to pay the ketubah then. Therefore, if he is now asked to pay the ketubah, he can claim that he would not have divorced her had he known that he would eventually have to pay. To prevent the husband from making this claim, which would have negative consequences for his ex-wife and her children, the court advises her not to bring up the issue of her ketubah. And that is the end of Mishnah Chet. Mishnah Tet discusses other enactments the rabbis made for the benefit of society. If someone sells himself and his young children to non-Jews as slaves, and pudinoto, we may not redeem him or his children. This law was enacted for the benefit of society so that a man will not sell himself and his children and rely on his fellow Jews to redeem them. The Mishnah refers to a man who had already sold himself and his children twice and now does so a third time. Only then must we refrain from redeeming them out of concern that he will do so continually. However, the first and second times we are obligated to redeem him, as the Rav explains. Nevertheless, if he or his children are in danger, we must redeem them regardless of how many times they have already been sold, as the Rambam writes in his commentary to the Mishnah, and the Meiri writes as well. However, we do redeem the children after their father's death, because there is no longer anyone there to protect them from assimilating into non-Jewish society. As long as their father was alive, he prevented them from becoming assimilated. After he dies, they lose that protection. Therefore, we redeem them. Another enactment, If someone sells his field in Eretz Yisrael to a non-Jew, the seller must buy the field's first ripening fruits from the non-Jew, even at an inflated price, and bring them to Jerusalem as bikurim from the field. If a person owns land in Eretz Yisrael and grows one of the 7 special species of that country, wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, and dates, he must set aside the first fruits that ripen each year, called bikurim, bring them to the temple and give them to a Kohen, as it describes in Dvarim, chapter 26, verses 1 through 11. This law too was enacted for the benefit of society. Even though the mitzvah bikurim does not apply to fruit that grew on land owned by a non-Jew, the rabbis obligated the seller to buy the first fruits and bring them as bikurim in order to discourage Jews from selling their fields in Eretz Yisrael to non-Jews, and to encourage those who already sold their fields to non-Jews to buy them back. And that is the Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Everybody should have a Shavua Tov. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.